She stood in her kitchen in New Orleans, a place alive with scents of peppers, garlic, and simmering spices. At 55, her hands moved with the confidence of decades, measuring not just ingredients but memories. Each recipe carried a story passed down by her mother and grandmother. Cooking was more than food, it was love, heritage, and pride. The city outside buzzed, but inside, time seemed to slow down. Her friends and neighbors adored her meals, gathering around her table whenever she invited them. They said her gumbo tasted like a hug, her sauces like music for the soul. Every plate she served was filled with history, yet alive with her own creativity. She never thought of her kitchen as small. It was her world, her sanctuary, her stage. Here, she had already found success. Her catering business thrived, and she was respected in her community. Weddings, festivals, and family celebrations always found her at the heart, serving dishes that brought people together. She wore her chef's coat with pride, her smile as bright as the beads at Mardi Gras. She had achieved a life filled with purpose. Still, something inside her whispered that more was possible. That whisper grew stronger each time someone asked, "When will you sell your sauces in stores?" At first, she laughed, dismissing the thought. The recipes were too precious, too intimate. Could they ever exist beyond her kitchen? Yet the seed of possibility had been planted, and like all good seeds, it began to grow. Her evenings became moments of reflection. Sitting on her porch with a glass of sweet tea, she thought about the legacy she could leave. Her daughters were grown, her responsibilities lighter. For the first time, she wondered what a new chapter might look like. The idea felt both thrilling and frightening. She remembered her grandmother's words, "Food is a gift, child. Don't keep it locked away." Those words now echoed in her heart louder than ever. The sauces weren't just hers. They were part of a story meant to be shared, and perhaps the world beyond New Orleans was ready to taste them. With a deep breath, she made a silent promise to herself. She would explore this possibility. She didn't yet know how or when, but she knew why. Hope had knocked on her door, and she was ready to answer. Tomorrow, she would begin to dream bigger. The thought no longer left her mind. She pictured bottles of her family's sauces lined up on shelves, bright with color and filled with tradition. It seemed almost impossible, yet her imagination kept painting the scene. What if her grandmother's recipes could reach kitchens across America? The vision stirred excitement and fear in equal measure. She started to research late at night, her laptop glowing in the dim kitchen light. She read about small businesses that became national brands, stories of people who turned family recipes into empires. Each tale filled her with both inspiration and questions. Could she really take that leap? Did she have the courage to try? Her first step was simple, writing down every sauce she had perfected over the years. The list grew longer than she expected. Spicy Creole blends, smooth tomato-based sauces, and sweet pepper glazes. Each one carried its own character, its own memory. Seeing them on paper made her heart race. This was more than an idea. It was a calling. She shared the thought with a close friend, who immediately cheered her on. "You already have the talent," her friend said. "All you need is the right plan." The encouragement lit a spark, yet she also knew this would not be easy. Success in her kitchen did not guarantee success on store shelves. One evening, she placed 3 jars of her homemade sauces on the counter and looked at them as if they were jewels. She imagined the labels, the colors, the brand that would carry her name. It wasn't vanity, it was legacy. These sauces told a story, and she felt ready to let the world hear it. But reality whispered in her ear. How could she scale up production without losing the authenticity? How could she navigate food regulations, packaging, and marketing? The list of challenges felt heavy, yet not impossible. She knew every great journey began with questions, not answers. Hope became her companion. With it came courage. Steady and determined, she would not run from the unknown. Instead, she would face it one step at a time. And so, the idea that once seemed like a passing thought now burned like a flame. Excitement carried her through the early days, but soon reality knocked harder. She tried to reproduce her sauces in larger pots, doubling and tripling recipes. The results were disappointing. The taste shifted, the texture changed, and the soul of the recipe seemed lost. Scaling up, she realized, was not as simple as adding more ingredients. She grew frustrated as Bosch, after Bosch failed to meet her high standards. Her sauces were her signature, and she refused to compromise. "If it doesn't taste like home, it won't carry my name," she told herself. Yet doubt began to creep in. Maybe the recipes were meant to stay small, meant only for family and friends. Still, she refused to let go. Each setback became a lesson. She adjusted heat levels, cooking times, and ingredient proportions. She filled notebooks with scribbles and corrections. Though the results were imperfect, she saw progress. Small changes brought her closer to the flavor she loved. But she also knew she needed help. This was no longer a home project. It was the beginning of something bigger. Pride told her to solve it alone, but wisdom whispered otherwise. It was time to seek guidance from those who understood the science of food. Her first call was to a local food laboratory, where experts specialized in adapting recipes for large-scale production. Just making the appointment felt like a victory. She was stepping into unknown territory, armed with hope and determination. The journey was moving forward. That night, as she cleaned her kitchen, she smiled at her own reflection in the window. She saw, not just a cook, but a businesswoman in the making. She had faced her first obstacle and refused to let it defeat her. Instead, she turned it into motivation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but also new allies. The road ahead was long, yet filled with possibility. She felt ready to keep walking, guided by resilience and the belief that transformation was already underway. The morning air carried a mix of excitement and nervousness as she walked into the food laboratory for the first time. White coats and stainless steel counters surrounded her, a world far different from her warm, spice-filled kitchen. She introduced herself with humility, yet her confidence in her sauces shone through. She explained her dream, her family legacy, and her vision for the future. The scientists listened carefully, asking questions about her process and her goals. They explained the challenges of preserving flavor while ensuring safety and consistency in mass production. Words like pH levels and shelf stability sounded intimidating, but she took notes with determination. Every detail mattered, and she wanted to learn them all. She realized that passion was her strength, but knowledge would be her ally. These experts weren't here to change her recipes, they were here to protect them. With their help, she could take her sauces from the heart of New Orleans to kitchens across the nation without losing their soul. The thought filled her with gratitude. Still, doubt flickered when she signed the first contract for consulting. The fees felt heavy, and the responsibility even heavier. But she reminded herself, investments were part of growth. She wasn't just building a product, she was building a future. Courage whispered louder than fear. Week after week, she worked alongside the experts, tasting samples, adjusting ingredients, and testing shelf life. Some days ended in frustration when flavors didn't match her memory. Other days, joy filled the room when a bath came close to perfection. Each small step kept her moving forward. Her resilience impressed the professionals. They admired how she balanced tradition with openness to science. "You remind us why food matters," one technician told her. The words warmed her heart. She wasn't just learning about formulas, she was inspiring those around her. By the end of the month, she had something she never imagined, the first stable version of her sauce, ready for larger production. It wasn't the final step, but it was proof that her dream could live beyond her kitchen walls. And that proof gave her hope for the next chapter. The factory kitchen felt larger than life, with towering pots and humming machines. Standing there, she realized how far she had come from her home stove. Yet the size of the operation made her nervous. Would her flavors survive this transition? The first trial batch began, and anticipation filled the air. As the machines worked, she hovered close, tasting spoonfuls at every stage. The first sample disappointed her, too thin, lacking the depth she knew so well. The second was better, but still not right. She frowned, determined not to settle. Her sauces carried her family's legacy. Nothing less than excellence would do. Hours turned into days of constant testing. She adjusted spices, changed cooking times, and refined proportions with the team. They encouraged her persistence, reminding her that perfection took patience. Each adjustment brought the sauce closer to her vision, but progress was slow and demanding. Despite setbacks, she refused to let frustration win. "This is a marathon, not a sprint," she told herself, repeating the phrase like a mantra. Her courage shone brightest in those long nights when she stayed late, reviewing notes and tasting samples until her palate grew tired. Resilience became her greatest companion. Then, one evening, it happened. She dipped a spoon into a newly adjusted batch, tasted it, and closed her eyes. The flavors burst with the richness of tradition, exactly as she remembered. Joy rushed through her, and tears filled her eyes. It was the taste of home, now born in a factory. The team celebrated with her, sharing in her relief and excitement. They had reached a breakthrough together. For the first time, she saw how collaboration could bridge tradition and innovation. This was no longer just her journey, it was a shared victory. But the process was not complete. Shelf tests, packaging, and branding still awaited her attention. Yet holding that spoon in her hand, she knew she had crossed an invisible line. She had proven that her sauces could scale without losing their soul. Hope tasted sweeter than ever. With her recipes finally adapted, she moved into the next phase, production. The small factory that partnered with her felt like a dream brought to life. Rows of gleaming equipment lined the space, ready to cook, bottle, and seal her sauces. She walked through the facility with wide eyes, realizing she was witnessing history in the making. The first official production day was emotional. She wore a hairnet and gloves, standing beside the workers as they followed the recipe she had fought so hard to protect. Bottles rolled down the conveyor belt, filling with her sauce, capped tightly, and labeled with her name. It was as if her family's story had taken physical form. She picked up the first finished bottle and held it in her hands. Pride swelled inside her chest. This wasn't just food, it was legacy captured in glass. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine seeing these bottles on supermarket shelves, waiting for customers to discover them. But with the joy came new responsibilities: managing supply chains, ensuring quality control, and keeping costs in line. All demanded her attention. The business side felt overwhelming, filled with numbers and deadlines. Yet she reminded herself, this was the cost of growth, and she was willing to pay it. She worked closely with the factory team, building trust and learning the rhythm of production. Every visit brought her deeper understanding of what it meant to run a brand. Mistakes happened: labels, misprinted batches, delayed, but she treated them as lessons, not failures. Her resilience guided her through. As the weeks passed, more bottles filled the shelves of her storage room. Each row was a promise of what was to come. She took photos, sending them to her daughters, who cheered her on from afar. Their pride fueled her determination, reminding her that this dream was bigger than herself. One evening, as she locked the factory door, she paused to look back. The machines stood still, but the future felt alive and moving. She knew the next step would be even harder, creating a brand that stood out. Yet with hope burning bright, she was ready to embrace the challenge. The bottles were ready, but she knew they needed more than sauce and sides. They needed a story on the outside. Sitting at her dining table, she spread sketches of labels, names, and color palettes across the surface. The task felt daunting, but also thrilling. How could she capture her heritage and her passion in a single design? She thought of her grandmother's kitchen, the warm colors of peppers and spices, the laughter around family meals. Those memories became her inspiration. She chose bold reds and golden accents, symbols of warmth and tradition. Every choice carried meaning, every detail reflected her roots. Naming the brand proved the hardest part. She wanted something simple yet powerful, something that spoke of quality and authenticity. After days of brainstorming, the name came to her like a whisper: Heritage Sauces. It felt right, like an embrace of the past while stepping into the future. A local designer helped bring her vision to life. Together, they worked late nights perfecting the typography, balancing modern elegance with cultural depth. The designer reminded her, your brand should taste like your story before anyone even opens the bottle. She smiled, knowing that was exactly her goal. When the first printed labels arrived, she held them gently, as if they were fragile treasures. She pressed one onto a bottle and admired the result. The sauce inside was her heart, but now the outside spoke too clear, confident, and true. For the first time, she saw her dream taking full shape. Her daughters visited and marveled at the bottles lined up with their new identities. "Mama, this looks like something I'd see in a big store," one of them said. Pride filled her eyes. She wasn't just cooking anymore, she was building a brand. With the labels ready, she knew the next challenge awaited: telling her story to the world. Marketing was not her comfort zone, but her courage had carried her this far. Now it was time to step into the spotlight and let others taste not just her sauces, but her journey. She had always believed her food spoke for itself, but now she realized her story was just as important. Sitting with a marketing consultant, she listened as they explained social media strategies, press releases, and customer engagement. It all sounded overwhelming, yet she felt a spark of excitement. She had a story worth sharing. The consultant encouraged her to lean into authenticity. People don't just want sauce, they said, they want connection. They want to know the woman behind the recipe. Those words stayed with her. She wasn't just selling food, she was offering hope, resilience, and tradition in every jar. Her first attempt at storytelling came through a short video. Nervous but determined, she stood in her kitchen, speaking from the heart about her grandmother's influence and her passion for cooking. Her voice trembled at first, but then grew stronger, filled with sincerity. When she finished, the team applauded. The video reached hundreds, then thousands. Comments poured in from people who said her story inspired them. Some admitted they hadn't even tried the sauce yet, but they were already rooting for her success. Hope traveled through screens, creating a community around her dream. She also learned the power of presentation. Professional photos captured the vibrant colors of her sauces, placed against rustic wooden tables and glowing lights. Each image carried warmth, inviting people to imagine the flavors before tasting them. Marketing became less about selling and more about sharing joy. Still, the process was exhausting. Social media demanded consistency, interviews required preparation, and events tested her confidence. Yet every time she doubted herself, she returned to her purpose, to honor her family's legacy and inspire others through resilience. That purpose gave her strength. By the end of the season, her brand had grown beyond her imagination. People no longer saw her only as a cook, they saw her as a symbol of courage and transformation. And now, with visibility rising, she was ready to tackle her greatest challenge yet, getting her sauces into supermarkets. The dream of seeing her sauces on store shelves felt closer, yet the path was steep. She began by calling local supermarkets, eager to introduce her product. But rejection came swiftly. "We already have too many brands," one manager said. Another politely declined, saying shelf space was limited. Each refusal stung. She carried bottles into offices, sharing samples with hopeful eyes. Some buyers praised the flavor but hesitated at the risk of a new, small brand. Others simply shook their heads. Walking back to her car with boxes still full, she felt the weight of discouragement pressing on her shoulders. Yet she refused to surrender. "No is just not yet," she reminded herself. Each rejection became a lesson. She refined her pitch, adjusted her presentation, and researched what buyers wanted. She understood this wasn't only about taste, it was about proving she could meet demand to strengthen her chances. She reached out to a distribution consultant. Together, they studied supply chains, pricing strategies, and shelf placement. The details were overwhelming, but she soaked them in, determined to grow stronger. Knowledge became another ingredient in her recipe for success. At night, she returned home tired but not defeated. She looked at the rows of bottled sauces in her storage room and whispered, "Your time will come." Hope steadied her heart, reminding her that every great success story included trials like these. One afternoon, after yet another rejection, she sat in her car with tears in her eyes. But instead of turning back, she drove to one more store. With renewed courage, she walked inside, greeted the manager, and offered her pitch. This time, something felt different. The manager listened closely, tasting the sauce with genuine interest. Though no deal was made that day, she left with a promise. "Let's talk again soon." It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no. It was progress, and that was enough to keep her going. Her resilience carried her forward, toward the breakthrough she longed for. Weeks of persistence finally bore fruit. She received a call from a local supermarket chain that wanted to test her sauces on their shelves. Her hands trembled as she hung up the phone, overwhelmed by both joy and nervousness. This was the opportunity she had been waiting for. The first real doorway to her dream. On launch day, she dressed with care, choosing a bright dress that reflected her optimism. Walking into the store, she saw her bottles neatly lined up, their labels glowing under the lights. For a moment, she stood still, tears brimming in her eyes. It felt surreal, as though her family's story had found a new home. Customers passed by, some curious, others reaching for a jar. She offered samples, greeting people with warmth and stories of her grandmother's recipes. Smiles lit up faces as they tasted the sauces. Compliments poured in, each one filling her heart with pride. Her hope was no longer just hers, it was shared. The sales exceeded expectations. The store manager congratulated her, promising to expand her shelf space if the trend continued. For the first time, she saw proof that her dream could thrive in the real world. Success was no longer a distant vision. It was happening, right there before her eyes. Her daughters joined her for a small celebration at home. They toasted with glasses of sparkling juice, laughing and reminiscing about the early days of doubt and trial. The journey was far from over, but they all agreed this victory was worth savoring. Still, She knew one store was only the beginning. To achieve national success, she would need to multiply this breakthrough countless times. Yet instead of feeling intimidated, she felt energized. The victory gave her courage to dream even bigger. That night, as she placed the empty sample trays into the sink, she whispered to herself, "This is just the start." Hope glowed within her like a steady flame, lighting the path toward the next milestone. The first supermarket victory gave her confidence, but expansion required strategy. She spent long days researching regional distributors and building connections. Networking events became her new classrooms, each handshake an opportunity to tell her story. She learned that success was not only about flavor, it was about relationships. Her persistence paid off when a regional distributor agreed to test her sauces in several states. The news felt almost unbelievable. She celebrated quietly, knowing this meant greater responsibility. Scaling production, managing logistics, and ensuring quality at larger volumes would be her next great challenge. At the factory, she doubled her visits, checking every batch, ensuring each bottle met her standards. Workers admired her dedication, noting how she treated every sauce like it was destined for her own family's table. That commitment inspired them to give their best. Soon, her sauces appeared in stores beyond New Orleans. Messages arrived from strangers in Texas, Georgia, and Florida, praising the flavors and thanking her for sharing her heritage. Reading those notes made her heart swell. Her story was no longer local, it was spreading across the South. The growth was not without setbacks. Distribution delays, mislabeled shipments, and rising costs tested her patience. Some nights, exhaustion made her question if she could handle it all, but each morning, she rose with renewed resilience, fueled by the belief that every problem had a solution. With every new state, her sense of purpose deepened. She wasn't just selling sauces, she was proving that dreams at 55 could be as powerful as dreams at 25. Each new store felt like a victory not only for her, but for every woman who had ever wondered if it was too late to begin again. And still, her vision stretched further. She dreamed of seeing her sauces not just across the South, but across the nation. That dream seemed ambitious, but she had learned one truth: with courage, even the most distant horizons could become reality. Her story began to attract attention beyond supermarkets. Local newspapers featured her journey, highlighting her courage and resilience. Television stations invited her to cook on morning shows, her sauces displayed proudly beside her. Each appearance filled her with both humility and pride. She had become more than a cook, she was an inspiration. At events, people lined up to meet her, not only to taste her sauces but to thank her for her example. Women in their 50s and 60s approached her with tears in their eyes, saying, "You've shown me it's not too late." Those words touched her deeply. Her success was no longer just her own, it had become a beacon for others. She accepted invitations to speak at entrepreneurship panels, sharing the lessons she had learned. Standing before eager audiences, she spoke of hope, resilience, and the courage to start again. Though public speaking once terrified her, she now spoke with confidence, her voice steady and filled with conviction. Her brand grew stronger as her story spread. Journalists praised the authenticity of her journey, while food critics celebrated the balance of tradition and innovation in her sauces. Every article, every interview, strengthened her belief that she was building something enduring. Yet fame brought new challenges. Requests for interviews piled up, demanding more of her time. Balancing publicity with production left her exhausted at times, but she reminded herself that visibility was a gift. Each spotlight moment was another chance to inspire someone else. Her daughters, proud and supportive, often accompanied her to events. They reminded her to rest, to care for herself as much as her business. Their presence grounded her, keeping her connected to the family roots that had started it all. Looking at the growing recognition, she realized something profound. Her sauces had opened doors, but it was her story that people truly embraced, and that story was still being written, one hopeful chapter at a time. Success brought her financial stability she had never imagined. For years, she had dreamed of a spacious, modern home where she could host family and friends with ease. One bright afternoon, she toured a house with tall windows, an open kitchen, and a garden bathed in sunlight. The moment she stepped inside, she felt peace. This was it. Signing the papers felt surreal. As she held the keys in her hand, she thought of her grandmother, who once cooked in a modest kitchen with cracked tiles. Now, her sauces had carried her into a new life. Tears of gratitude welled up as she whispered a prayer of thanks for the journey. Moving day was filled with laughter. Her daughters helped unpack, and neighbors came by with flowers and smiles. She placed her first jar of sauce on the new kitchen counter as a symbol of everything that had brought her there. The house wasn't just walls and rooms, it was a reward for resilience. The new space gave her fresh energy. She decorated the living room with photos of her family and framed newspaper clippings of her success. Every corner of the house reflected both her past and her present, a perfect balance of memory and achievement. In the evenings, she would sit on her wide porch, sipping tea as the sun set. The comfort of her new home reminded her that dreams weren't only about business, they were about quality of life. She finally had the space to breathe, to reflect, and to grow even more. Her daughters often teased her about the modern kitchen, saying it looked like it belonged on television. She laughed with them, but deep down, she felt a renewed sense of possibility. This was more than a house. It was proof that transformation was real. As she prepared dinner one night, she smiled at the thought of what lay ahead: a home, a thriving business, and a heart full of gratitude. Yet her dream was not complete. Another long-awaited adventure was about to begin. Her journey to Italy. Italy had lived in her imagination for decades. The land of olive oils, vineyards, and vibrant flavors called to her heart. With her business thriving and her future secure, she finally booked the ticket. Boarding the plane, she felt both nervous and exhilarated. This was a dream long delayed, now finally within reach. Her first steps on Italian soil were magical. The cobblestone streets, the music of the language, and the aromas of fresh pasta filled her senses. She walked through bustling markets, tasting cheeses, breads, and wines, marveling at the richness of culinary traditions. It was as if she had entered a living cookbook. She took cooking classes with local chefs, learning techniques she had never tried before. Though she was already skilled, she remained humble, eager to absorb every lesson. Each dish reminded her that food was a universal language, a bridge connecting cultures across oceans. One evening, she dined in a small family-run. As she tasted the homemade tomato sauce, she thought of her grandmother. Tears filled her eyes as she realized how deeply connected her journey was to women everywhere who cooked with love. The experience strengthened her belief in the power of food to unite. Traveling through vineyards and seaside villages, she collected new inspirations. She filled her notebook with ideas, herbs, textures, and flavors she could weave into future creations. Italy gave her more than joy. It gave her fresh vision for the path ahead. Her daughters joined her for part of the trip, sharing laughter over plates of pasta and gelato. Together, they created memories that would last forever. The trip became more than a culinary adventure. It was a celebration of family, resilience, and the courage to dream. As her plane lifted off on the journey back home, she gazed at the Italian coastline disappearing beneath the clouds. She carried more than souvenirs. She carried renewed hope, new ideas, and the certainty that her life's purpose was still unfolding. Back in New Orleans, she reflected on the road she had traveled, from her grandmother's kitchen to supermarket shelves nationwide. Every step had been filled with courage, resilience, and hope. At 55, she felt younger in spirit than ever before. Her life was not slowing down, it was expanding. She realized her sauces were more than products. They were symbols of perseverance, of the belief that no dream is too late to pursue. Each jar carried not only flavor but also inspiration for those who held it. She had built more than a business, she had built a legacy. Her story resonated with women across the country. Letters arrived daily, thanking her for showing that transformation was possible at any stage of life. She read each one with gratitude, humbled by the thought that her journey had sparked hope in others. Looking at her new home, her thriving company, and the memories of Italy, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Yet she also knew this was not the end. Every day offered new beginnings, new dreams waiting to be embraced. Life, she realized, was an endless cycle of renewal. She continued to innovate, experimenting with flavors inspired by her travels. But more importantly, she continued to inspire, speaking at events, mentoring young women, and sharing her journey became as meaningful as the sauces themselves. Her purpose grew larger than her own success. In quiet moments, she still returned to her porch, sipping tea as the sun dipped below the horizon. She thought of the woman she had been, the one who once doubted if her sauces could live beyond her kitchen. Smiling, she whispered, "We did it." And with that whisper came a promise to herself to keep moving forward, to keep embracing change, and to keep living with hope. For at 55, she had learned the most powerful truth of all: every ending is only the beginning of something new.